and Arius can't understand, as many people have struggled to understand, as we should all, I think, struggle to understand, how God can endure human things. And so Arius says that. He says, as far as they are concerned, the incorporeal God suffers things suitable to the body. So he's pointing out this dilemma. How can God suffer? We see Jesus suffering. If you're saying Jesus is the same as God, are you saying that God suffers? Are we saying that God suffers? I'll open that to debate. If Jesus, make the mathematical equation, right? Jesus equals God. Jesus suffers. Therefore God suffers. That's the equation that Arius is having trouble with.
You have to put something else in there, and that is that God is Jesus Christ is incarnate. Otherwise, it doesn't work, does it?
Right. But because Jesus is incarnate, and kind of what, right, right, and that's the mystery, right? I mean, and that's the mystery that Arius wasn't able to wrap his head around, and that he wasn't able to encourage others to submit to. And so remember we said that this heresy was geared towards rationalists, towards people who wanted to understand. Okay, and so this doctrine, he's presenting a doctrine that is far easier to understand. It's far easier to understand that God had a specially chosen Son whom he created and whom he gave the power to do all these things, but it wasn't the same as him. That's far easier to understand. I mean, if it was true, that's far easier to understand because it doesn't require mystery, it doesn't require faith. That's what Arius was doing.
When was the first?
Okay, so Arius is trying to emphasize the distance that God has with creation. And here, I think he's very typical of unorthodox heresy, is that a lot of them deal with a distancing of the divine and the human. They deal with this alternate tracks, saying God's got to be up here, us humans are down here, and that there's very little contact. And so for us as Catholics, the incarnation becomes the place at which those come together. And so that shapes all of our theology, is the incarnation. So if we miss the incarnation, then we're going to be left with this two tracks. We're going to be left with this God up here, humans down. Right? We've still got Arians today that don't call themselves Arians. We've still got a kind of the mainstream, if I can use so general of a term, kind of the mainstream kind of wishy-washy Christian sentiment understanding that we have is what? Is that Jesus was a good teacher and we should do what he tells us to do, and if we follow the gospel, then everybody's lives will be happier. Isn't that kind of what we get and just kind of culture? We get a lot of people that like what Jesus said. They talk about his lifestyle that he proposed. That's Arianism. Because that's what Arius says, is that Arius says that Jesus was a moral exemplar. And that's it. Is that that what he bestowed upon the human race was enlightenment of how you're supposed to live your life. And we've got a lot of Christians who believe that that's all Jesus did. We've got a lot of people that think that that's all that... I've had so many conversations in my life of people that say, well, it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as what? As long as you live a good life, right? Isn't that what it's all about? Just living a nice life? That's all. I mean, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what church you go to. None of those things matter.
What does that even mean? I mean, like,
right.
if you...
But haven't you heard that?
I've heard it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
I know, but it's Arianism. It's Arianism.
Yeah.
Right? And so...
But how can you justify what living a good life even means if you can't even define what you believe?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. But I just want to point out that this kind of modern mindset, this is very historically rooted. And I think you find it explicitly in Arianism. It's saying that Jesus is just a prophet. He's someone who teaches us. We should listen to what he taught us. Kind of all the platitudes about how you treat your neighbor and all those things. But as far as saving us from sin, as far as suffering, death, and resurrection, as Mark was talking about, we kind of just dismiss that, right? We don't really talk about covenant and sacrifice. We just look at him as a moral exemplar. And I think it's a big problem, and it's really eroded the base of faith for a lot of folks, at least from what I've seen.